For 10 days, my family celebrated Grandma Evelyn's marriage like it was proof that perfect love still existed. Matching shirts, champagne dinners, a vow renewal film titled 50 Years, One Love, No Secrets. But each time our cruise moved closer to Dubrovnik, Grandma touched the seam of her blue scarf and asked whether we were stopping near the old railway station. Grandpa called it confusion. Her brother Silas told us not to encourage her. Then, at the final port, an elderly man appeared behind the security barrier holding a faded wedding photograph. Grandma looked at him and dropped her bouquet. Grandpa stepped between them. "Evelyn, you don't know this man." The stranger turned the photograph toward us. "She knew me long before the life you're celebrating," he said. Silas immediately ordered security to remove him. But Grandma grabbed my arm and whispered a name I had never heard before. Then the stranger produced an envelope in Grandma's handwriting and asked, "Did they tell you I abandoned you? Or did they tell you something worse?" What happened next destroyed the anniversary story my family had protected for 50 years. My name is Nora Whitmore. I'm 38 years old and I live in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to Before She Spoke Stories. Grandpa Howard booked 11 days aboard the Aurelia Crown for his 50th anniversary with Grandma Evelyn. Every cabin door carried their wedding photograph, and Daniel handed out shirts reading 50 years, still choosing each other. Everyone called the cruise romantic. Grandma smiled for every camera, but while boarding, she quietly asked me who had chosen the final port. Great-uncle Silas had selected the itinerary himself. He claimed Dubrovnik had the perfect sunset for the final anniversary portrait. When Grandma asked whether another port was available, Silas placed one hand over hers and said, "You're remembering an unpleasant trip that never happened." Nobody challenged him. In my family, Silas corrected memories with the confidence of someone correcting spelling. Grandma wore the same blue scarf at every port, even when the afternoon heat made it unnecessary. I noticed her fingers repeatedly tracing one section of the hem. When I asked whether something was caught inside, she pulled the scarf away and said it was only an old habit. Across the deck, Silas had stopped listening to Howard's speech and was watching us. My Uncle Daniel had created a documentary titled 50 Years, One Love, No Secrets. During rehearsal, the screen filled with church photographs, vacations, and handwritten notes between my grandparents. Howard narrated their marriage like a historic achievement. Then one unfamiliar picture appeared for less than 3 seconds. Grandma stood beside a railway platform looking younger and frightened enough to run. The caption identified the photograph as New York, 1968. Dr. Maeve Calder, the cruise historian sitting beside me, leaned closer and whispered, "That isn't New York." She recognized the station architecture as Eastern European. Before I could ask more, Silas stopped the film and ordered Daniel to delete the image. He called it a mislabeled photograph from somebody else's album. I asked why a stranger's photograph showed Grandma wearing her blue scarf. My mother, Claire, sighed and said I was turning an anniversary into an archive investigation. Daniel joked that my museum work had made me incapable of enjoying anything without checking the date. Everyone laughed except Grandma. She touched my wrist under the table and whispered, "The date is wrong. The place isn't." "What would you have done?" Pressed Grandma for answers immediately, or waited until the family stopped watching. Share your view and subscribe to Before She Spoke Stories. At dinner, Howard told the story of meeting Grandma at a church fundraiser in 1971. He said she was 26, unmarried, and grieving parents who had recently died. Claire cried because she had heard the story her entire life. I remembered restoring Grandma's family papers years earlier. Her parents' death certificates were dated 1978, 7 years after Howard claimed their deaths brought them together. When I mentioned the dates, Silas blamed Howard's age. "The year may be wrong, but the love story is accurate," he said. Grandma stared into her wine and murmured, That wasn't where we met. Howard's smile tightened. Before I could ask who she meant by we, Silas requested another toast. The table rose around Grandma, burying her unfinished sentence beneath applause. That night, I entered the film editing room while Daniel was at dinner. The railway photograph had been removed, but the original file remained in the deleted folder. I restored the uncropped version. Grandma was not alone. A young man stood beside her, holding something wrapped in a blanket. On the photograph's back, someone had written a sentence, then scratched out every word except 3. Tell Silas nothing. I copied the railway photograph before Daniel could permanently erase it. The paper had been scanned at high resolution, revealing a date stamped along the border, October 1966. Grandma would have been 19. The young man beside her wore a dark railway uniform, and the blanket in his arms was too carefully held to be luggage. Someone had cropped him out of every later family album. The next morning, Grandma called my cabin before sunrise. She did not ask about the photograph. She asked whether I had seen her blue scarf. When I brought it to her, she checked the hem and looked relieved. I asked who Thomas was. She whispered, a name I was told never to say. Then Silas knocked, and she immediately changed the subject. Using the ship's archive terminal, I searched 1960s ferry records between Italy and the Croatian coast. One passenger manifest listed Thomas Bell and Evelyn Bell traveling together in 1966. Grandma's birth date and hometown matched exactly. The emergency contact was not Howard. It was Silas Vale, brother. The family could dismiss a photograph. A government travel record was harder. Silas barely looked at the manifest before calling it coincidence. He said Bell was a common surname, and Evelyn had probably traveled under someone else's booking. When I pointed out her exact birth date and his name as emergency contact, he smiled. You work with old documents, Nora. You should understand clerical errors. He was not surprised by the record, he was prepared for it. My mother refused to examine the document. She said Howard had loved Grandma faithfully for 50 years, and one old manifest could not rewrite that. Why are you doing this now? She asked. I told her Grandma had been asking questions before I did. Claire answered, she's 76, memories shift. That was the moment I realized protecting the anniversary mattered more to her than understanding her own mother. Daniel discovered I had restored the deleted photograph and changed the editing room access code. He said the film belonged to Howard because Howard paid for it. Then he removed 2 more early photographs from the timeline. One showed Silas outside a foreign clinic. The other showed Grandma sitting beside a hospital window. Both had been labeled New York, though neither location looked American. That afternoon, Silas privately requested a cognitive evaluation from the ship's doctor. He claimed Grandma had become fixated on false memories and unfamiliar names. Howard supported him and told the doctor the family feared she might wander off at the final port. They were not waiting to see what Grandma remembered. They were building an explanation that would make every memory sound like illness. While helping Grandma change for dinner, I noticed the blue scarf's hem had been stitched by hand. With her permission, I opened one loose section. Inside was a folded railway ticket dated 2 days after the passenger manifest. The destination matched the station in the photograph. On the back, Grandma had written an address and one sentence. Wait there until I return. During a spa appointment, Grandma became dizzy and I helped her dress. That was when I saw an old surgical scar across her lower abdomen. Our family always claimed Claire was Grandma's first pregnancy and that she had delivered without surgery. The scar was older than Claire. When I asked about it, Grandma covered herself and said, Silas told everyone it was an appendix operation. That night, the music box melody began playing from Howard's cabin. Grandma gripped the rail so tightly her knuckles whitened. I asked what happened in 1966. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she touched the hidden railway ticket and whispered, I was supposed to meet someone at that station. Who? Her eyes filled. The man they said abandoned me. She looked toward Silas's cabin. And the baby they told me never breathed. When the ship docked in Dubrovnik, the elderly man from Grandma's memories was waiting behind the security barrier. He held a faded photograph, a bundle of returned letters, and one tiny, knitted booty. Grandma saw him before anyone announced his name. Her white anniversary lilies fell onto the pavement. Howard stepped in front of her while Silas shouted for security. The stranger called, "Evelyn, it's Thomas." Grandma gripped my arm and repeated the name she had whispered beside the music box. Howard said she was reacting to suggestion, not recognition. Then Thomas mentioned the railway station address hidden inside her scarf. Nobody outside our family knew that ticket existed. Grandma stepped around Howard and asked, "Why didn't you come back?" Thomas passed the photograph through the barrier before security reached him. Grandma was 19, wearing her blue scarf and holding red carnations. Thomas stood beside her with a ring on his hand. On the back, in Grandma's handwriting, were the words, "To Thomas, until our little girl can come home." Howard called the picture staged. Dr. Maeve said the paper and ink appeared period correct. Thomas said he and Grandma married privately in 1966. Silas opposed the relationship and demanded she return to America after childbirth. Thomas had been told Evelyn and the premature baby both died. Grandma had been told Thomas abandoned her and their daughter never breathed. Two people had spent 57 years mourning different versions of the same lie. Dr. Maeve helped me search the Regional Civil Index. The marriage record existed under Thomas Bell and Evelyn Vale. We found no divorce, annulment, or death record ending it. Howard claimed he had known nothing about an earlier marriage. Silas insisted foreign records were unreliable, yet he could not explain why his own name appeared as witness on the original registration. What would you investigate first? The marriage, the baby, or Howard's claim that he knew nothing? Share your answer and subscribe to Before She Spoke Stories. Thomas asked Grandma what they had planned to name their daughter. Her answer came without hesitation. Marina. My mother, Claire, stopped breathing for a moment. A woman named Marina Bell had attended family gatherings for years as Silas's widowed family friend. She had sat beside Grandma at birthdays, funerals, and charity dinners. Our family had kept the missing daughter close enough to watch, but never close enough to be recognized. Thomas opened his hand and showed us the tiny knitted booty he had preserved after being told his wife and child died. Grandma began searching through her jewelry pouch. From beneath an old brooch, she removed its matching pair. Later, Marina sent me a childhood photograph from her guardian's album. She was wearing both booties. The baby Grandma mourned had survived. Marina joined us by video from the United States. She had been told Evelyn willingly surrendered her because motherhood interfered with a new life. Silas introduced Evelyn as a distant aunt who preferred not to discuss the past. Marina remembered Grandma crying whenever she visited. She had mistaken grief for guilt because every adult around her supplied the same explanation. Howard denied knowing Marina's identity before marriage. Then I found records showing his cousin handled her guardianship transfer. Howard had also funded parts of Marina's schooling through anonymous payments. Claire called it evidence of kindness. Thomas asked the obvious question. How could he support a child he claims he didn't know existed? Howard answered that Silas had requested favors without explaining why. Silas's estranged grandson Lucian contacted me after seeing Daniel's anniversary posts. He had discovered old cassette tapes while clearing Silas's storage unit. One recording was dated months before Howard married Grandma. Lucian played it through my phone. Silas's younger voice said, "Evelyn still believes Belle may return." Then Howard answered, "Once she accepts the child is gone, she'll stop waiting for him." Lucian's cassette kept playing. Howard's younger voice discussed Grandma's grief like a problem to manage. He suggested changing her address, intercepting foreign mail, and keeping Marina's guardians nearby. When the recording ended, Howard claimed Silas had manipulated him too. I asked why a manipulated man sounded so calm. He answered, "I believed I was helping Evelyn move forward." While Howard met privately with Silas, Claire found medical forms inside his cabin safe. He had prepared an emergency incapacity petition before the cruise began. It described Grandma as confused, delusional, and vulnerable to strangers claiming false relationships. If she recognized Thomas publicly, Howard planned to use that recognition as evidence she could no longer make decisions. Claire finally admitted Thomas had contacted her when she was 19. Howard showed her a letter and called its writer an unstable foreigner obsessed with Grandma. He made Claire burn it in the fireplace while he watched. She had forgotten the signature, but remembered one sentence. "Ask your mother why she named you after mine." Thomas's mother had been named Claire. Daniel confessed he learned Marina's identity while assembling the anniversary film. An uncropped photograph showed infant Marina in Silas's arms beside hospital records. Silas ordered him to remove her and promised his debts would be paid after the cruise. Daniel told himself the secret belonged to older people. In reality, he had traded his mother's history for financial rescue. Lucian brought property documents found with the tapes. Thomas's father had discovered that Silas benefited from land transferred through falsified post-war claims. If Evelyn remained married to Thomas, those records could have entered her household and threatened Silas's inheritance. He had not separated them only from prejudice. He destroyed a marriage and displaced a baby to protect money. Silas gathered the family in Howard's suite and proposed what he called a humane solution. Thomas would leave quietly. Marina would receive compensation. Grandma's memories would be described as trauma-related confusion. I would delete my copies and receive a larger inheritance. Silas said, "A truth this old helps no one. It only gives grief a new address." "No," I replied. "It tells grief where it came from." I met Grandma privately with the ship's legal officer and an independent physician. She understood where she was, why Thomas had appeared, and what Howard intended to file. She revoked Howard's authority to make medical decisions and asked me to record her memories in her own words. She did not choose Thomas or Howard. She chose time without either man controlling her answer. I sent Howard, Silas, Daniel, and Claire the same timeline questions separately. When did they first learn Thomas existed? When did they learn Marina survived? Who intercepted the letters? Their answers contradicted one another by decades. Howard claimed ignorance until marriage. Silas said Howard knew beforehand. Daniel admitted Howard had approved cropped photographs. Every attempt at self-protection exposed someone else. I recovered Daniel's deleted files and rebuilt the film chronologically. The romantic montage now began with Grandma's first wedding photograph, followed by the ferry manifest, railway ticket, birth documents, returned letters, matching booties, and Marina's childhood images. Howard's anniversary speeches remained, but beside the original words Thomas had written decades earlier. The family celebration became a timeline of appropriation. Daniel believed the ship's theater would show his corrected anniversary film. Only family, Thomas, Marina, Dr. Maeve, Lucian, and the legal officer were invited. Silas entered smiling, certain I had accepted the inheritance offer. The lights dimmed. The screen displayed 2 wedding photographs side by side. Then Lucian's cassette began. Silas heard his younger voice say, "Tell Belle that Evelyn died. By the time she recovers, the child will already be gone." The cassette filled the theater with Silas's younger voice, arranging Grandma's disappearance from Thomas's life. When the lights came up, he called it an incomplete recording. Lucian played the next section. Silas discussed the false death notice, Marina's guardianship, and returned letters in precise detail. Grandma looked at her brother and asked, "Which part was supposed to protect me?" Thomas did not demand that Grandma return to him. He stood beneath their wedding photograph and asked, "Did you leave me?" Grandma's answer came quietly but clearly. No. She said Silas told her Thomas had chosen another woman and wanted nothing to do with the baby. Thomas placed 50 returned letters on the table. Every envelope carried Silas's forwarding instructions. Marina faced Grandma across the theater. "Did you leave me?" she asked. Grandma covered her mouth and shook her head. "They told me you never breathed." Marina opened her childhood album to a photograph of herself wearing both knitted booties. For 57 years, each woman had been taught that the other made a choice. Neither had been given one. Howard finally admitted he knew Thomas was alive before marrying Grandma. He claimed he loved her and believed stability would heal her. Grandma answered, "Love that requires silence is not safety." Howard had not created Silas's first lie, but he had intercepted letters, funded Marina's guardians, and repeated Thomas's words as his own. Affection did not erase participation. The ship's legal officer explained that the earlier marriage required formal review because no divorce or annulment had been located. Howard's marriage might be legally defective, though the answer would require courts and certified records. Silas had expected everyone to panic over scandal. Grandma surprised him by saying, "I'm not asking which man owns 50 years. I'm asking who stole them." Lucian's property files showed that Marina's inheritance had been redirected through guardians connected to Howard's family. Some of it later supported Daniel's education and the family foundation. Claire and Daniel had not knowingly stolen from Marina, but they had benefited from her erasure. Marina requested a complete forensic accounting. For the first time, the invisible daughter had standing inside the family record. An independent physician confirmed Grandma understood the evidence and could make her own decisions. Howard's incapacity petition was blocked before filing. Grandma appointed an outside attorney for medical and financial matters, with no relative holding sole authority. She chose temporary housing after the cruise, away from Howard, Thomas, and Silas. Her first free decision was not choosing a husband, it was choosing space. Several relatives wanted the corrected film released publicly to destroy Silas and Howard's reputations. Grandma asked me not to turn her life into entertainment. I agreed. The evidence went to attorneys, archivists, and the Family Foundation's board, not social media. "Truth doesn't need an audience to be real," I said, "but it needs a record nobody can rewrite." Would you have exposed everything publicly or protected Evelyn's privacy while preserving the evidence? Share your answer and subscribe to Before She Spoke Stories. Weeks later, Grandma rented a small apartment near Marina. Thomas visited with the letters he had written. Marina brought the matching booty. I placed both booties inside a protective archival case beside the first wedding photograph. Grandma removed Howard's white anniversary lilies from the table and replaced them with red carnations, the flowers she had carried before her family rewrote her life. Grandma did not immediately return to Howard or begin a romantic life with Thomas. Marina did not offer instant forgiveness. They began with short visits, verified records, and questions nobody answered for them. Then Grandma sat before my recorder, adjusted her blue scarf, and spoke in her own voice. "My name was Evelyn Bell, before my family taught me to forget." The cruise was meant to celebrate 50 years of one perfect love story. Instead, it returned a husband, a daughter, and a life my family had declared dead.